All right, good evening and welcome to the Danvers Planning Board meeting of September 13th, 2022. Just got to get my agenda turned the right way here. So we have one item on the agenda for 367 Maple Street, which has been continued. So if you're here for that matter, that will not be heard this evening. We do have the first item of Isle of Skye Estates definitive subdivision, 105 Dayton Street. Request by 115 Dayton Street LLC for extension of completion date for the Isle of Skye Estates definitive subdivision and for the reduction of performance guarantee for completed site improvements for the Isle of Skye Estates definitive subdivision. I am going to have to recuse myself on this. I just want to make sure that, Jean, are you on?
She's not yet. I just sent her the meeting.
Okay.
She had a question. She had an issue with that. So let me just make sure that. Let me just circle back and make sure she's
Okay.
on.
We'll need her on, right?
So this meeting is a combination of a live meeting and we are also remote with a Zoom meeting. Attorney McCann is here, I see, for the applicant, I believe.
Yes, I am. Thank you.
All right, so as I said, I'm going to recuse on this, but we're just waiting for Jean Hartnett, which I think I see her up there.
Amazing.
There we are.
I'm here.
Hi, Jean. So I'm going to let Lou take over for a minute while you can address this issue, and I'll be right back. Thanks, Lou.
No problem at all. Okay, this is the, as Jim mentioned, this is the Isle of Skye Estates definitive subdivision, 105 Dayton Street. Request by 115 Dayton Street LLC for extension of completion date of the Isle of Skye Estates definitive subdivision and for the reduction of performance guarantee for completed site improvements for the Isle of Skye Estates definitive subdivision. And I see Attorney McCann. Would you like to give a presentation on behalf of the applicant?
Sure. Thank you very much. Very briefly, this is the Isle of Skye subdivision, and it has been under construction for some time. This is a 6-lot subdivision. Of those six lots, 3 of the homes have been completed and are occupied. 3 other homes are under construction. Landscaping continues to be underway for all of the lots. That's being completed now. I went out this afternoon and there were 3 properties had landscaping crews working on grading and finishing that up. So we are requesting a reduction in the bond amount. We had proposed a reduction to $76,605. However, I do believe that the town engineer has updated that suggested bond reduction amount as recently as today, and I have not seen that reduction. Perhaps Mr. Morse has that. And we are also requesting an extension of the completion date. The original request I had put in my letter of August 10 was till June 30th of 2023. Again, Mr. Morris and I discussed this today, and we thought that perhaps actually a 1-year extension to September 30th of 2023 might be more appropriate. So we have everything completed. And really the reasoning for this is as homes are constructed and heavy equipment is being brought in to complete home construction as well as to complete landscaping, we don't want to finish top course of paving and some of the final touches of the subdivision roadway until that work is done, so that heavy equipment doesn't damage the road work. So that's the reason for the request for the extension of the completion date. That together with the supply chain issues and everything we've gone through over the last couple of years has caused some delay in the construction, but it is well underway and looking to be completed within the year.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Attorney McCann. And in terms of, and Josh, just for clarification here, it's my understanding, I guess, from engineering, the completion date would be, I guess the proposed extension date would be September 30th, 2023, as she just mentioned. And I believe the revised amount, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is $77,000 and $90.70?
That is correct.
Okay. So 77,090.70. Okay. Very good. I'll ask the members of the board if they have any questions at all. Tori?
No, I have no questions.
Okay. Jean, do you have any questions?
No, I don't have any questions.
Pardon?
No,
Okay.
I don't have any questions.
Okay, very good. And I guess the only thing I'd ask you, and I think you covered this, Attorney McCann, but just in terms of the completion date, you think that would be a sufficient period of time to take care of, you know, any engineering comments as well as dealing with supply chain issues and so forth?
We certainly hope so.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you.
Very good. So, okay, well, no further questions, I think, from me or from the board. Any members of the public have a question? Mr. Bradstreet, why don't you come in?
Thank you.
You can identify yourself for our audience?
Bill Bradstreet, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 1. My only question, if I can at this time, has this project put aside or paid money for the town to accept this road or way that this project is built on? The only reason I ask is because right now the town is facing 80-some-odd streets or ways in town that were not accepted over time in the past, and it now costs the town considerable money and time to get so many streets or ways accepted each year. So
Okay.
my question is, has this LLC paid the money, or are they gonna have to pay the money prior to whatever date?
Okay. Attorney McCann, is that something, can you address that question, or?
Sure. That, in fact, the answer is yes, Mr. Bradstreet and Mr. Chairman. Part of the bond amount includes costs associated with as-built plans and certification that's required, and that's the cost that's associated with street acceptance.
Okay.
Ms. McCann,
Through the chair?
thank you. Thank you, sir.
Very good. Thank you very much. Okay. Your question? You identify yourself, please?
Yes, Hank Farrell, 7 Putnam Lane. This is a nightmare for me, so it's very sensitive to me. This project has torn my whole neighborhood apart for 4 years, and it's the slowest moving construction project I have ever seen. As far as the releasing some of the guarantees on the property, I saw the sheet of completion, items completed, as far as the monetary goes, and the grass is listed. The grass on the sidewalk side of that development has less than 4 inches of topsoil next to the sidewalk because they never broke away the underlayment for the sidewalk when they put it down. I watched these guys do it. They had 3 landscapers out there. The guys dug a little bit, spread soil that barely resembled topsoil. That is all dead now.
Okay.
The only strip of grass that's alive is right next to the curb where the soil was deepest. The other side of the road isn't much better. There's no reason to be allowing them access to this money when the place looks like unspeakable. She says landscaping was being done. I drove home today, I looked over there, I did not see it any different than I saw it last week. Yes, they've been bringing in some topsoil, but nothing there moves at more than a glacial pace.
Okay.
They only have 3 guys that actually work for Thompson that do any work up there. A few of the places are being done privately on their own now. And one house still has not been accepted. They did put in the Cape Cod berms. Half of them are destroyed from the heavy equipment, like she said, which is understandable, but they are destroyed. the grading on that grass down towards the curb is such that when it rains, it washes the dirt out at the bottom. So I cannot see any way that that part of the project should be released from the guarantee.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Attorney McCann, can you address this resident's concern, as well as I'd like also to hear what, if Josh can have anything to offer as well?
Sure. The town engineer is the one who reviews the project as it's going forward and has been reviewing this project and has gone out and looked, and he is the person that reviews this on behalf of the town to make sure that the work is done within the subdivision. And we're talking about subdivision roadway work that's associated with this bond. And he is the one who verifies that the work is done according to the plan. He has done that. He has reviewed this request, and it's been under review now for over a month, and has gone back and forth with the planning staff and with the developer with regard to the line items. And the town engineer's recommendation for the bond amount is higher than what we had originally proposed. But we will accept certainly what the town engineering department has come up with, which is the 7790.
Okay, thank you. Josh, I just want to ask
Sure.
from the town's perspective.
Yeah, Attorney McCann, you know how Attorney McCann explained the situation, that's right. The engineering staff goes out, reviews the subdivision, its status, the conditions of everything. And they just they go item by item on that spreadsheet, what's complete or not complete. One other kind of anecdote or comment I would make is that, we are still holding a decent amount of funding, and obviously anything related to the road or road construction that's not complete or broken or is in not good condition, that hopefully, this is complete as soon as possible. I think that's the town and the abutters feel similarly in that. But if anything is broken or not done correctly or not installed correctly, the bond won't be reduced. The bond won't be reduced for that item, and ultimately, we're not gonna close out the subdivision if things aren't complete.
So in terms of the process, just to explain to resident as well as the audience in terms of, so what takes place in terms of prior to sort of this being reduced to zero as well as?
I mean, I guess as we stand right now, how I look at it is we still have a decent amount of, funds that are remaining and things that are incomplete. And ultimately, when, hopefully when this is complete, we'll do a very thorough review, investigation, analysis to make sure that everything, the sidewalks, don't have cracks in it. All of that stuff needs to be fixed ultimately before, the subdivision is deemed complete.
Okay.
So I understand that there might be some issues, and we could work with the abutter and the applicant if there are issues. But, obviously it's an ongoing construction situation, and obviously there will be some issues, but I feel confident with the money that's set aside for what's remaining, that that the project, that the project will move forward and things that are broken will be fixed and that sort of thing. So.
And if any butters have any further, have concerns and such, they can reach out to town staff?
Absolutely, and we work side by side with the engineering department, and Attorney McCann would, she's involved, she's under, when there's issues like this gentleman is saying, we reach out to the developer, the applicant, these are the issues, let's talk, let's figure this out, what's happening, how do we fix this, how do we move forward? So, yeah, of course, I'd be happy to help any questions, any issues that come up during the construction process, would be happy to help.
Gotcha. So, very good. Yes, sir?
Hank Farrell, 7 Putnam Lane. I'm a bit surprised by the fact that I have been talking at overtime extensively to Steve King,
Okay.
as recently as the other day, and I am surprised to hear that he went along with this and even raised that, because he agreed with me as far as the fact that there is not enough topsoil on the sidewalk side to support the growth of grass. Maybe a few weeds.
Okay.
I understand there's money left after this release, but it seems to me that in writing, you are accepting that that grass is done on that, what you're releasing right now.
Based on what the town engineer's recommendations.
Right, and I am saying that he's wrong.
No.
I personally visually watched him. Nobody went out there and dug up and saw what was put down and what was taken out.
Sure.
So I just want it on the record that that should not be happening.
I appreciate
I
that.
mean, there's many, many other items up there that could be at length, but at this point, I know that nobody's listening. Thank you.
We are,
Point of clarification.
yes.
I'm looking at the spreadsheet of remaining costs, and I see one item which is 6 inches screened loam, another one which is lime fertilized and hydroseed. I do not see anything else that looks like it represents soil and grass.
Is that an outstanding item?
Those are both outstanding, 6 inches screened loam for $3,000, lime fertilized and hydroseed for $2,090.
Yes.
Yes.
Those are both outstanding, so those are both
Yep.
part of the sum of $77,090, $77,090.70, which the town engineer identified as outstanding. Josh, can you clarify, is there anything else on there that is grass and soil, or is that what Mr. Farrell is?
Yeah, no, looking at it, just, in more detail at this exact moment, that appears that those are the two line items associated with like grass / landscaping.
Okay.
So I'm understanding that to mean that Mr. King did agree with you, Mr. Farrell.
I misread, I apologize.
No.
Which is not really the factor, the condition that's there.
Regardless, thank you for bringing this to our attention.
Absolutely. We appreciate your bringing this to our attention and in terms of, I'm sure that if you have, further questions, town staff, as well as I think the applicant will be able to address any questions that abutters might have. So, okay. Thank you. Any further comments or questions from members of the public? Okay. Any further questions from members of the board? Okay, so turning now to the application. And Josh, do we need to, I do have here the language of the tripartite, the first modification of the tripartite agreement. Does that need to be read to the record?
No, I think there just needs to be some type of motion that includes an extension of time to September 30th,
Okay.
2023, and then the reduction from the original 141,000 to the 77,090 and 70 cents.
Well, reading here, I guess I can,
Yeah, you could. Right. You could use it as a guide if you'd like. That's fine.
right, I can entertain a motion. I'd like to entertain a motion that the time for completion of, this is as relates to the, just hold on here, gotta do two things at once here. Okay. I would like to entertain a motion with respect to the request by 115 Dayton Street LLC for extension of completion date for the Isle of Skye Estates definitive subdivision and for the reduction of performance guarantee for completed site improvements for the Isle of Skye Estates definitive subdivision. Entertain a motion that the time for completion of the developer's obligation expired on June 30th, 2021, and is extended to September 30th, 2023, unless such date is further extended by a written agreement of the parties hereto. By a vote of the planning board, the remaining balance held under the tripartite agreement is $77,090.70, reduced from $141,000 to secure the remaining incomplete work. All of the terms and conditions of the tripartite agreement not expressly amended hereby remain in full force and effect, executed in full force and effect. So I'd like to entertain that as a motion.
So moved?
Do we have a second? I can second that motion. Oh, I can second that motion. Very good. Can we have a vote? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? None. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very
It
much.
is passed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. I think we can have Mr. Sears come back.
Think so?
There was
I
not an
recused-
abstention, he
yeah,
recused himself.
Excuse myself from
Yeah.
it. So they had 3 members, so they could vote. Just, I think in the future, if I recuse, since you're taking over the role as the chair, you can't make the motion.
Right.
Someone else has to
I
make the motion.
entertain the motion.
So, yeah, so someone makes the motion, and then they have to make it and second it.
Okay,
I
so
don't think you can second the motion.
okay, very good. So can I,
So
So maybe that's Gene, I guess.
Gene would have to second
Yeah.
it.
Jean, would you be willing to second that motion?
Yes.
Yeah. I think there's like a technical issue.
It's a little Robert's Rules of Order.
Very good, thank you.
There was just,
All right, great.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. So as I mentioned, the other item that was on the agenda has been continued. Do we need to entertain a continuance on that, Josh?
yeah, you should do a motion to continue to the next meeting, yes.
Okay, sure.
Could you do that for me, Lou, while I'm waiting
Yes,
for my
sir.
computer to come up here?
Okay. Entertain a motion to continue the application of 367 Maple Street, request for site plan review pursuant to Section 4 of the zoning bylaw submitted by NVA Danvers Veterinary Management, Inc. for property in the residential R3 zoning district. Applicant proposes to increase the number of parking spaces at the property and associated modifications. Assessors map 25, lot 24.
Motion been made. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. All right, so at this time, we don't have any minutes, Josh, to vote on at this point?
No, we should very soon.
All right, so I did mention, I did send an email knowing that we were all going to be here anyway, and I thought that might be an opportunity for the board just to talk for a short period. I know it's not posted, but to talk kind of in a roundabout way about just our goals and objectives for the next year. The board we have a new associate member that's going to be coming on. But I know that we haven't had a meeting with the ZBA and Concom for a little while, and I think at last meeting we had with them, there were some topics that I think we want to address going forward just for planning for the town. I know that we had the adaptive reuse come in and try to get in front of us, but we weren't able to pull that off in time for the last public annual meeting, which we're not going to have another meeting until probably next May at this point, I would assume. So we don't have any special meetings on the docket coming up. So let me add, in that vein, before I get to the other subjects on adaptive reuse, do you know what the status is on the Summer Street building, Josh, and the other property they were trying to kind of spot zone for that?
Fortunately, Nancy's still here. She was just on here. Not to,
Oh,
it just might be beneficial, Nancy, just to stay on for this one moment.
I mean, this is just a discussion, because we have a full board.
So, the 42 Summer, I believe that there's been discussion, and Lou, feel free to comment. I believe that there's been discussions about potentially adding that parcel and that other parcel, the 367, to the historic district, the new Salem. Is that what you're referring to, Jim, or?
Yeah,
That's,
to see how that is progressing.
that's
Is
my
that-
understanding. I'm not on the Historic District Commission,
Right,
however.
or just-
Yeah,
You're on the preservation,
on the
right?
preservation, right. And there's currently a 1-year, there's a demolition delay on both properties currently.
Yeah.
Mhm.
there's been discussions, I think, with some members of the community and other boards and commissions about the idea to potentially add 42 and 367 Maple Street to the Salem Village Historic District.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's an but Nancy, that's why Nancy, is there something that, okay, so,
I'd be happy to chime in if you want me to, Mr. Chairman.
Sure, that'd be great.
The proposal is not to add 42 Summer Street or 367 Maple Street into the Salem Historic District, but in fact, the initiative by the Historic District Commission is to create 2 new single-lot historic districts. The owners of both of those properties are opposed to that initiative. With regard to 42 Summer Street, there is an application pending before the Board of Appeals to separate
That was
the
continued
lot at
yesterday.
42 Summer Street in order to allow for the preservation of that structure on its own lot, and that's pending before the Board of Appeals. With regard to 367 Maple Street, there is a site plan application pending, which is what we just continued, which proposes a removal of a small rear section, newer section of that existing building, but preservation of the remaining historic section of that building. So that's kind of the status of both of those two, and I'd be happy to go into any further detail on that you would like me to.
On the 367, I think we'll hold on that, because that's going to be at the next meeting that you're continuing to.
right.
Yes.
Does the
Yes.
board have any questions on the, I guess my question, Josh, because I think the impetus for the adaptive reuse was at least 42 Summer Street. If 42 Summer Street and 367 Maple Street get resolved to, it probably won't be to everyone's satisfaction, but get resolved in a certain degree, is there still impetus and appetite for adaptive reuse?
I'd be interested in hearing from the board and from members of the community, but I would think that it would certainly be appropriate, as we kind of, when we discussed this several months ago, as a tool in the toolbox for, I think there's, as you mentioned, those are items that in recently that have properties that, from a community standpoint have, cultural value. But I would say that in my professional viewpoint, that it would be a valuable tool that you could use in properties all over the, throughout the community and throughout the town. So I guess your question, since it looks like these potentially might be saved or resolved, as you say, in my opinion, I still think that the adaptive reuse would be, or the idea of it, or some type of, some aspects of it would be beneficial to still be, on the books in some manner, right? Because you could, as we discussed it several months ago, there will be opportunities and properties and that the same whether 42 Summer Street right now is on people's minds and thoughts, but in 6 months and a year, that same situation is gonna keep. There's always gonna be some really, a house or a commercial building that has some cultural historical value that, I don't know, from a policy standpoint, I don't know if every time there's a historic property we have to, adding it to a historic district or making a historic district is, that's one way to do it. But I think if you had adaptive reuse on the books,
Yeah.
that's another kind of alternative that administratively or just policy-wise could be easier, or kind of,
Yeah, I think though what they're trying to do, I said spot zoning, but how do you designate one house an historic district? I'm trying to wrap my head around that.
Yeah,
Versus, we have a present district, which is on Center Street,
Right.
which consists of several properties, several criteria, a lot of them are 100+ years old. How do you spot
I
in a one historic district house.
I don't think it would probably rise to that spot. Zoning is difficult to get to that point, but right, it's kind of like a policy question or decision with the town, or what is clearly there's an interest in saving, or saving portions of a lot of these, the old farmsteads, the houses, the so what is the best
Yeah.
the best way? I think that's an avenue, right, that some groups and some people in town are viable and would be positive and beneficial. I think the adaptive reuse, which we were discussing, is also just another route, right? It's another way to
Yeah,
get.
I think
get there.
my biggest issue on that was that if the special permit granting authority is the zoning board of appeals, they need to be involved and they need to be comfortable with it, because they're the ones, it's not coming in front of us.
Sure.
They need to be part and parcel of the whole agreement to, enforce it, take it on. At least that's how it's presently written, unless it was gonna be switched to our board, which I'm not sure if the reasoning why it isn't, or is or isn't.
Sure. Right. That's why zoning amendments have public hearings and we have these conversations. And
Yeah,
well, not to get too much into that item, but I think part of it was, just in terms of like some of the other regulatory decisions that ZBA makes is sort of in line with, they do like findings and variances, and it gets closer to their wheelhouse. But I mean,
sure.
but if that's
I mean, that's,
but
if that's the reason, that's fine. I just think they gotta be part of the
yeah, for sure.
promotion.
I think that we
Your
would,
thoughts, Lou?
Yeah, I think it's, just based on on the discussions that we had a few months ago about adaptive reuse, and I know some of the concerns that were raised, and I know concerns that you raised, was that we did want to, have the other, pretty much the other parties at the table. So in terms of having, ZBA involved in the discussion, even, Conservation Commission. So I think it makes sense to sort of because I think there is still a need, and at least I think we want to be able to at least air it out a little bit more. And so I think having discussions, having discussions with the other, other relevant bodies, I think would be helpful, sort of to see if indeed this is a tool that is an additional tool in the toolbox that would be useful. So I think it would be good to see what they have. It would be interesting to have a conversation with them.
Tori?
Yeah, I agree with Lou. I think it's an important tool because a historic district does not create the means for preservation of a property. So adaptive reuse might be a way to protect the property and create the means to maintain it. We don't want a bunch of beautiful architecture crumbling because there's no way to support it. But it's really potentially powerful. I mean, it could totally upend zoning in neighborhoods. And I think we really need to look at the permit granting process. What I had issues with in the wording that was proposed was that it seemed like there was great potential for it to be a huge loophole in a town with a lot of very old properties.
Jean, do you have any comments on that?
I just agree with everyone. I think it warrants further discussion.
Yeah, I think, and maybe Josh, you can kind of forecast what's coming up in the future, the next few months, but it looks like, that there's not a lot, I don't know how much we have on the upcoming agendas. But maybe this is a time or opportunity where we can look into doing some planning like we had done in the past. One of the things we were able to get, and the town was able to get, were some grants to help with studying things like adaptive reuse, and maybe providing outside experts to help us with writing the legislation and then promoting it in front of the town, whether it be, ready for a May town meeting or have to go to a special town meeting, I don't know. But I mean, could we add, a few other things that we're looking at? I mean, Aaron did mention that he mentioned that to comply with the MBTA's Community Act, there needs to be an amendment to the zoning bylaw. And can you comment on that? Do you know what he was kind of
Sure.
talking about that? So that might be something we would add also.
Yeah, sure. So I could give a decent amount of commentary on your kind of macro level, kind of what you've been saying. So, I guess I'll start with your comment about, yeah, in the very near term, our next meeting will be sort of moderately busy or have a decent agenda, but as we speak right now, October, November, right, don't have a significant amount of applications. One thing that planning staff would like to put forward soon was we have our subdivision rules and regulations are quite old, could use some revision or updates. I have them right here. The cover's from 1979. We do have like a draft that we would like to share with the board shortly. So that's definitely something in the short term that would be, I think, beneficial. So it doesn't have to go to town meeting. It would just be with the planning board. In terms of your question or comment about the MBTA communities, this is referring to, it's a statewide state regulation. It's associated with communities who, it basically the state telling communities that in certain locations in their community they have to have a certain amount of density in order for the community to receive grants in the future. Luckily, the whole downtown zoning that we went through is basically what they want or are making communities do. If you are an MBTA community, or which is, you don't necessarily have to have commuter rail, but you're in Metro Boston and you have bus or other transit options. So luckily we did that whole process. I think what Aaron was alluding to is there are specific density requirements. I think I don't have all the rules are sort of changing in the regulations, but there's a certain density that you have to meet. And with our downtown zoning, I believe that we're just the density would likely need to be increased a little bit in order to meet the regulations that the state is putting together. So for us, a lot of communities are struggling in that, they have town centers or downtowns, but they didn't go through that whole rezoning process. They don't, their density is quite low, and they haven't gone through the whole process that which we just did. So for us, the exercise wouldn't be a significant. Well, we would be amending our density table. Instead of having to we wouldn't have to redo the entire thing, but we'd probably have to modify the density table in some manner to comply. And so what he was alluding to was we talk internally quite often. We were thinking that probably would occur potentially at the November 2023 town meeting potentially.
Okay.
Because the deadline to make these changes actually just keeps sort of changing also. So at that time, if we were going to make that zoning change or zoning amendment, we internally would also like to propose making some other changes to the downtown zone, just after having it on the books for 2 or 3 years. Just probably not changing it significantly, but just there's some language, some sentences, some words. There might be an opportunity to kind of make it clearer for developers, residents, staff. And if we were going to do that exercise, it might make sense to also just do some other kind of potentially other zoning bylaw changes.
Do we know if Sally Kearns had any luck with trying to preserve a bus route?
I believe I read an article in the Salem News. I believe that I read something in the newspaper that was moving forward or appeared to be occurring. Yes,
Good.
but I could confirm that. But I believe that was moving forward. One other kind of comment in terms of short-term, near-term, the town manager's office or the administration of the town, I believe, I'm not sure if anything's been sent out publicly or flyers and all that, but their office is at some point in this winter is going to do a kind of, they're calling it like a strategic plan, or a town of Danvers like large strategic plan. And so staff is understanding that not like in a holding pattern, but obviously out of that strategic plan that would be probably ongoing for a year plus, there would obviously be recommendations, I'm assuming, related to planning and or zoning, and obviously we would, be that there is going to be a public process soon that's interrelated to all of this, that we would probably piggyback onto,
Okay.
So I think some of the things that, all in all of our minds when we drive around town, what's, macro level, the downtown, what's happening downtown, what's happening with the mall, these kind of larger economic, I think, obviously what you folks are probably interested in, bigger, like, kind of planning, plans, will be discussed, and through that strategic plan process, there, we'll probably get some planning and zoning.
Because I know we've talked about commercial 3 at the mall,
Sure.
potentially adding a residential component to that,
Right.
like a marketplace setting where you have a lot of the big box stores going out of business or turning to online, so you end up with a lot of nail salons and,
Sure.
not that there's anything wrong with nail salons.
We
I don't know how many you need in one town, but I mean,
we do we do have a good amount for sure.
Fair amount.
but I mean, as kind of a better use maybe for the mall in the future, to plan for the future as part of the
Okay.
planning, to give another secondary use, maybe an overlay or, with the kind of the residential component. It's good to see that they're building that storage facility over at the Leiden, so that was an eyesore for a lot of years, the Leiden Pool. So that's good to see, and they're also doing the one on Route 1. So, I mean, but I think we'll have enough storage facilities at that point, so we want to see if maybe some housing can be brought in to help the tax base, and so I think that's good stuff. I mean, I guess, would there be an opportunity maybe to get some grants from, like we've done before in the past, and we've had the gentleman come up and help us with some of that legislation on, whether it be the C3 overlay or is there some type of maybe historic advocacy group that might have some money that could be tapped into to help us, with crafting this type of legislation, or maybe more so for that. I think my biggest concern is it's great if we have a bylaw, but is there going to be a resource for the owners to either get a low-interest loan or have some type of grant that they might get toward helping them preserve the property? Because, giving the opportunity and saying, that's great, you can reuse the property, but, at conventional rates and borrowing and so on, maybe there's some type of fund out there, a preservation fund of some sort that could be tapped in to help us with that. Because if you have the bylaw, it's great, but you gotta have some type of additional means maybe. Do you know of any of that, or maybe Lou, do you guys know anything like that?
No, but it sounds like a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The
I mean, I know there's nonprofits set up to handle stuff like that, maybe,
Yeah, there's I'm sure there's state programs, federal programs, usually, there's a decent amount of criteria that has to be met generally, especially at the federal level, I think, and they're probably geared towards kind of bigger projects, right?
First
and like,
period
And you have
stuff.
Mass Historic
Single
Commission
family.
and all, but you could,
Right.
there's always could be,
Yep.
definitely,
Yeah, I
It's
mean,
worth
there's
looking
gotta be
into.
other towns that have this, so we don't necessarily reinvent the wheel,
Mhm.
what works best,
sure.
you know,
There are groups like trustees of the reservations that acquire historic properties and
Yeah.
preserve them.
Mhm.
I don't know if they've ever partnered with a town to do something like that.
yeah, they're big in Ipswich, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
Greens Beach and other places like that, and
Appleton
they,
Farm, yeah.
and they get a lot of land donated to them, they get a lot of, charitable money donated to them, so maybe there's someone there, if you know anybody that we could talk to, Josh, or
And what is, I guess the question from a policy standpoint, it's trying to save, like, some of the historic, is that?
Yeah,
again,
so-
like, so there's adaptive reuse we discussed, the district, you're talking about maybe like another avenue or another means to,
well, not only to provide them this new zoning bylaw, but also to say, hey, if you are going to take on this, first period home or second period home, and, there are resources that are available through the state or federal government,
sure,
and here they are. Maybe, and this is what's worked in, Concord or Lexington or other places like that, so maybe there are
sort of like even
resources.
even a guide or informational pamphlet or with a listing of
Yeah.
resources
I
essentially.
mean, like we had those two gentlemen, the name escapes me, but the gentleman that helped us with the downtown zone.
Right, sure,
You
like
know,
consultant, right,
the consulting firm, there's
Right.
gotta, I'm assuming they might know someone, or they, we're not the first town to do this,
sure,
so that would help all of us,
okay.
and if there's grants, I mean, I know for the downtown stuff, the town got tens of thousands of dollars in state grants that they were able to use to bring those experts in and have our 20 meetings with, to get it right, and I think
Right.
we came up with a good product that, the town meeting subsequently voted on, and now we're using. And we're still tweaking it as we
Right,
go, but
right.
we have a good model, and I think, other towns will look to us at some point. Just like when we did the, extended family living zoning.
Right.
Evan Belansky was the planner back then, and he came from, well, I think he ended up in Peabody after us, but I think he came from, I forget what town he came from, but we were able to kind of mirror it off, I think, what Peabody was doing in other towns,
Sure,
and, use that as a model, so I think, that's the type of thing that we should try to do here, and if we've got time, and we don't have a lot of stuff on the agenda, let's be planners, and let's, talk with the ZBA and the Concom and in preservation, historic, and see what, we can all come up with a good bylaw.
And Jim, you're talking about also in terms of grants, like potentially grants, both to sort of get there in terms of helping to create the bylaw, as well as potentially at least identifying sources of funds to help those, once a bylaw is in place, to sort of to get there as well. Is that what you're?
Exactly,
Okay.
yeah.
Sounds like
makes
an
sense.
excellent avenue to explore.
Yeah. I mean, Mass Housing does a lot for people that are at certain income levels. Is there a resource like that for people that, want to do something for historic properties? That's my question, I guess.
we could certainly look into that,
Yeah.
sure, I'm sure there's organizations that, focus on this topic, of course,
And then, other than that, I mean, I know, like I said, I think, for me, I think C3 would be the next big place to look at, because I think there is a good potential at the mall to improve upon it, and also, not to overpopulate it, but, you could perhaps, put some type of residential use. I mean, maybe go up a level, or maybe, look into seeing what makes sense over there. And, that would involve Simon probably getting involved, and Simon, as we know, is a big property owner there in a lot of these projects throughout the Commonwealth, throughout the country. So, I guess it comes down to what's good for the town and what's good for, you know, how much development do we want and what would be a good use where, you know, they could probably tell us, you know, forecasting out the next 10, 50, 100 years. I mean, that's what we're planning for. We're not planning for just today. You know, what's a mall gonna look like in, the year 2100? You know, I don't know.
Sure.
But it doesn't look like it's gonna be what we have now. I don't know. So can we plan for that today? You know, take steps toward that.
Yeah, as I kind of mentioned earlier, like out of that strategic plan that I think will probably begin in like December or January, I'm assuming that the mall or some of those larger, more marquee commercial properties in town, there will probably likely be significant conversation about them, and then out of that kind of conversation.
So will you be enlisting members from each board to be on that, or how would you, because I know in the past I've sat on boards like
Sure.
that for, you know, studying industrial zones and
Sure.
Route 114 zoning, and the town has had, you know, a member or two from the ZBA, from the planning board, from the Concom, and, you know, broad brush of
Sure.
people getting involved.
At this moment, I'm not exactly sure of the framework of but I will certainly gather that information, and we'll be happy to share it with the board. And if you'd like, I could, you know, advocate for the, you know, board or board members who are interested in partaking in these of the meetings and public sessions.
Okay.
I'll be happy to, you know, keep everyone, informed of everything that happens. So.
Great, thank you. Other items from the board that you might be thinking of, planning-wise, or maybe other than kind of housekeeping things with what Josh mentioned, fixing some rules and regs, and every year, you know, just by way of practice, the zoning administrator, you know, finds that there might be some loopholes or some, you know, i's that need to be dotted and t's that need to be crossed, but do you folks have any other concerns maybe going forward?
I think in terms of, you know, right now at least, I think that, you know, I mean, adaptive reuse definitely is an area that I think that, you know, I'd like to, you know, look into, and I'm glad you brought it up. So I think that that's, and I think I also agree that I think that the area where Liberty Tree Mall is also something definitely worthy of study, because that's, you know, considering what we see in other areas, I think the mall as we know it is definitely changed and is changing. And so I think that there's a potential opportunity there too. You know, because also frankly, we have other stores that are, you know, we have Aldi that's relocating, that's gonna be building there as well. So, so I think looking at potential residential uses would be good as well. But those, aside from the sort of the housekeeping and any sort of, I'm interested just in terms of if there are any sort of, you know, and I know this is sort of part of the sort of tuning up of sort of any sort of the downtown, you know, bylaws. I'd be interested also to see if there's been a lot of, you know, there's been a lot of attention lately to the downtown, to Danvers Square, to some, you know, and so I think I'd be interested in seeing too if there's anything that staff has learned over the past couple of years that either that could be tweaked a little bit, or that's missing or needs to be added. So, but that's
Certainly all of those,
that?
certainly, yes to all of those questions.
Okay.
Tori?
I agree with these priorities. I think the adaptive reuse and the mall are really good places to focus right now. And I like the idea of a larger discussion involving some more of the boards.
Great.
Tori, what was that? I'm sorry, just.
I like the idea of a larger discussion involving more of the boards.
Mhm.
We did that, was it about a year and a half ago?
Not to give Aaron any more work or homework, I believe that internally we discussed doing something, don't hold me to it at this moment, but we've discussed that internally, certainly about doing something of that nature,
It's like a plan.
at least in the next couple months, and
Mhm.
maybe hearing what the group is saying, it seems like it would be beneficial, so.
Great.
Anything that is put together, obviously, we would provide information as soon as we, you know, in terms of logistics, time and date and all that. We'd be happy to, you know, invite all of you and have this kind of, a lot of these things that we're discussing, you know, are kind of bigger, complicated items that, you know, where we sit we're obviously very interested in hearing what you all have to say, so.
Gene, do you have a question or comment on this?
No, nothing to add to what you guys.
All right. I think, Nancy, since you're here, I know this isn't publicized or anything, but you're here often with applicants, and maybe get your point of view?
Yes. I certainly think the mall area, the C3 area, could use a revisit to bring it a bit more in tune with what we're seeing in other communities that people like very much. Linfield Marketplace always comes up with the mix and the look of what that is and what it brings to the community. And I think there are several areas, not just the mall, but several areas within the environment of the mall, that's Zone C3, that could use a look for expanding beyond what's allowed currently in C3. The downtown zoning, I've had a number of conversations with planning staff, with Josh and with Aaron, and there are some issues with some of the formulas for the downtown that need to be looked at again to make what you want, which is generally described as commercial floor, first floor, residential above, to make that financially viable, and having the formulas in the bylaw work. So maybe that needs to be looked at a little bit. And I've had that discussion with planning staff. So and the adaptive reuse, interesting, a lot of potential there. I think I was involved just listening to when it came before you folks recently in the last go round, and that's certainly worth pursuing, I think.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, I was going to mention that, like you mentioned the downtown stuff. I know that, that legislation was passed probably a couple years ago now.
Yeah. February of 2020, I believe.
February 2020. So, as we all know, there was a lot of time involved. We had probably 23, 26 meetings, and I'm not seeing a lot of applications for development downtown. Granted, the hairdresser's place came before that zoning on the 10 unit, the 10.
44 Maple.
44 Maple came just before we started that. And then the Hot Wad property is actually 40R, so that was kind of not necessarily part of what we've legislated from the old fire station to High Street. I know there were a couple applicants around Cherry Street area that, maybe one did it, one didn't. So I think we want to make sure, and I know that bylaw is enormous, and I know that there's a lot of formulas. If we are going to try to attract developers downtown, as Attorney McCann stated, we want to make sure that it's not overly cumbersome, that they say, well, it's too hard in Danvers, we'll go to Beverly, or we'll go to Salem. So can we maybe, as part of our retooling and looking at this, talk to developers and their attorneys and see if there are ways that, it could be a little bit easier for them to fit.
There's certainly segments of it that I think could add some more clarity for sure. After kind of digging into it and applying it and just going through the exercise.
Yeah.
Like anything else, right? It's you don't know what, after using it just for a couple of years, it just the macro level, it's great, it's the kind of the details and kind of just adding as much clarity, and it being from a development standpoint, I think predictability and just being able to be clear, I think, is very beneficial for them, and just from an administrative side also. So I think if and when we have to modify the density table, that is something that would be beneficial for sure. And
Okay.
I'm sure Attorney McCann would probably agree, so.
Yes, I would.
Our most popular fan, Mr. Bradstreet, would you have any comments?
It all sounds good to me. It's a work in progress.
Yeah, well, and
You're working on.
we're trying, and again, we're planners, right? So I know we do approve things here and there, but it looks to me like there's a bit of a lull, you know, with higher interest rates, inflation and so on. You know, things were crazy the last few years. I do a lot of real estate work as an attorney. But things have kind of, you know, not slowed down. I mean, it slowed down a little bit, but I mean, we want to make sure if we have an opportunity now as the planning board that, you know, if we're going to come here on a Tuesday night and there's one item on there, you know, maybe we can be doing some planning for the future for the town as planners. So that's what I like to try to entertain, and we've been very good. You know, the town staff, as long as I've been on the board since '96, we every couple of years or so, we do have plans, and we're planning for the town, and that's what I think is part of our job. Bill?
Did you catch the news today? The stock market lost almost 1,000 points.
I saw that,
And
1,200.
a comment was made about the economy of the country, so we do have problems.
But we want to be ready for the next
Yes.
rebound. And I think we want to make it easier, not easier, but
Attractive.
attractive, yes, for applicants to say, hey, I might want to spend some money in downtown Danvers, or, you know, and make it work for everyone, because we've got plans, but I think they might be a little cumbersome for some and expensive too, where you know, so that's it.
Sounds good to me.
Other questions, comments? All right, that's all I had, so I think we could, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move the way adjourned.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, have a good night. Thank you.